In the Imperium of Man, where 1 trillion souls labor in darkness for an emperor entombed in gold, where faith is measured in blood and loyalty purchased with suffering, the arrival of a single mind should mean nothing. Hive worlds burn. Sectors fall. Billions die unrecorded, their names forgotten before their bodies cool. The administratum processes death in such quantities that individual extinction becomes a rounding error in ledgers spanning light years. Yet sometimes rarely, impossibly one person's arrival creates ripples that become waves, that become tsunamis, drowning entire subsectors in consequence. Lelouch v. Britannia had died. He remembered the blade, Suzaku's trembling hands, the zero requiem complete. His sins erased through calculated martyrdom, the world united in hatred of a tyrant who'd orchestrated his own assassination. Peace, purchased with his damnation. Then he'd opened his eyes in hell. The underhive of Tertium stretched before him, a gothic nightmare of corroded metal and industrial decay. Promethium fumes choked air thick with chemical pollution. Somewhere above, through kilometers of hive structure, the planet's surface existed. Down here, in the depths, only darkness reigned. Emergency lumen strips cast sickly yellow light across sprawling slums where millions existed in squalor. The architecture was wrong, massive, baroque, utterly inhuman in scale. Cathedrals built from rust, machinery that screamed when it moved. Lelouch stumbled through refuse-choked passages, his mind racing. The technology level seemed simultaneously medieval and impossibly advanced. The people wore rags, but cybernetic implants jutted from their flesh. The few he'd encountered fled from his foreign appearance, his clean clothes marking him as dangerous. He'd found shelter in an abandoned manufactorium, its machines silent for decades. Through gaps in the superstructure, he'd glimpsed the hive's true scale. A vertical city housing billions, each level stacked upon the last, the weight of civilization pressing down until the bottom levels simply crumbled under their own mass. 3 days of careful observation revealed a truth that made his blood run cold. This wasn't just poverty. This was systematic oppression, refined across millennia. The planetary governor, Lord Militant Varick, ruled through Adeptus Arbites enforcers, who dispensed Emperor's justice with shock malls and execution warrants. Food shipments were diverted to upper hives, medical supplies hoarded, entire districts quarantined and burned when disease spread. The people prayed to an emperor as God. Genuine faith mixed with desperate hope that suffering had meaning. It reminded him of Britannia, the numbered hierarchy, the casual cruelty, the belief that might made right, that the strong deserved to crush the weak. Lelouch's left eye throbbed. The Geass remained. He tested it carefully on a lone enforcer. One command: absolute obedience. The man had walked into the toxic sump pools without hesitation, but something felt different. Using the power created pressure behind his eye, a sensation like reality bending around his will. And for just a moment, he'd glimpsed something vast and hungry staring back from behind the enforcer's pupils. No matter, he'd toppled Britannia with Geass and tactical genius. This Imperium would fall the same way. In a forgotten corner of the underhive, Lelouch found them, the desperate, the angry, the forgotten. A resistance cell calling themselves the Light-Bearers. Believers that the Emperor's light should reach everyone, not just the privileged. Their leader, a scarred woman named Kale, had organized supply raids and minor sabotage. Brave, futile. They lacked vision, strategy, someone to show them how to truly fight. Lelouch stepped into their meeting, wearing a makeshift mask crafted from a broken air filtration unit. Not quite Zero's helmet, but it would serve. "You've been fighting the governor for 3 years," he said, voice carrying across the assembled crowd of 50. "How many victories? How many victories?" Kale's hand moved toward her crude stubber pistol. "Who are, how many?" Lelouch interrupted. "How many enforcers killed? How many supply caches liberated? How many of your people still alive?" Silence. The answer written in their haunted eyes. "You lose because you fight like victims. Desperate raids, minor sabotage. You think suffering makes you righteous. That faith alone will save you. Lelouch's eye gleamed behind the mask. I'm going to teach you how to win. Not tomorrow, not eventually. Within the month, Governor Varric will be dead. His enforcers scattered, and the Underhive will be yours. Heresy, someone whispered. The governor rules by the Emperor's will. Then the Emperor, Lelouch said coldly, has abandoned you to die in darkness. I haven't. Follow me, and I'll show you how to fight an empire. The Geass pulsed. And though he used it on no one, his presence, his absolute conviction resonated through the crowd. Some walked away. Most stayed. Enough stayed. Zero had returned. The Imperium would learn what that meant. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. The revolution began with information. Lelouch spent 2 weeks mapping the Underhive's structure, identifying patterns in Arbite's patrols, tracking supply shipments from the upper levels. The Lightbearers thought in terms of violence, kill enforcers, steal supplies, survive another day. Lelouch thought in terms of systems. The Imperium's strength was its structure, its rigid hierarchy. That structure was also its weakness. The governor receives food shipments every 3rd day, Lelouch explained, gathering the cell's lieutenants around a crude map scratched into metal plating. The convoys pass through 3 checkpoints. The Arbites rotate shifts every 8 hours. Their communication relies on Vox units operating on 17 different frequencies, none of them encrypted, because they assume no one in the Underhive has the technology to intercept. KL frowned. We've hit convoys before. They're too heavily guarded, because you tried to fight them. Lelouch's finger traced an alternate route. We're not going to fight them. We're going to redirect them. The convoy receives orders from Precinct Command via Vox. If someone say, an Arbite sergeant ordered the convoy to divert to an alternate distribution point in the Underhive, they'd obey without question. We don't have an Arbite sergeant. Lelouch's eye gleamed crimson behind the mask. We will. The Geass made it simple. One enforcer, separated from his patrol, received a single command. Return to your precinct and order tomorrow's convoy. Diverted to coordinates I'll provide. Afterward, forget we met. The man's eyes glazed purple, total obedience overriding his will. He walked away, purpose in his step, completely unaware he'd just doomed his comrades. 24 hours later, 3 transport trucks loaded with food and medical supplies rolled into an Underhive distribution point where the Lightbearers waited. No shots fired. No casualties. The guards didn't realize anything was wrong until it was too late. By then, Lelouch's people had vanished into the Underhive's labyrinth. Supplies distributed to a dozen hidden cells. The Imperium's response was predictable. Varric couldn't allow such blatant theft to go unpunished. Arbites flooded the lower levels, beating suspected rebels, executing collaborators. 30 innocents died in the first purge. Lelouch watched from the shadows, expression cold behind his mask. Casualties. Acceptable. Necessary. The people needed to see the Imperium's brutality unmasked. They're killing people who had nothing to do with us. Kael grabbed Lelouch's shoulder, fury and horror mixing in her voice. We have to stop this. No. Lelouch's voice carried no emotion. This is exactly what we need. Every innocent they execute creates 10 more rebels. The governor is playing into our hands. These are people, our people. They were dying anyway, Lelouch said quietly. Starvation, disease, industrial accidents. The Underhive kills thousands daily, and no one cares. Now their deaths have meaning. Now the upper hives see the cost of their comfort. Let the governor's brutality radicalize the masses. When we strike, it won't be 50 rebels, it'll be 50,000. Kyle stared at him, something like fear in her eyes. Who are you? I'm the man who's going to free you. Lelouch turned away. Whether you like my methods or not, the second operation targeted the Arbites themselves. Lelouch used Geass on a dozen enforcers over 2 weeks, each commanded to create subtle chaos, misfile reports, delay patrols, feed misinformation to command. The Arbite structure began fracturing from within. Officers blamed each other for escalating failures. Paranoia spread. When 3 enforcers disappeared simultaneously, Lelouch having commanded them to walk into the sump pools, the precinct captain suspected treachery within his ranks rather than external attack. The third operation was psychological. Lelouch crafted propaganda crude pamphlets, printed on stolen presses, each bearing a red symbol he called Zero's mark. The message was simple. The Emperor protects those who protect themselves. Rise, and the tyrants fall. It spread through the underhive like wildfire. Zero became a name whispered in the darkness, a symbol, a promise that resistance was possible. The Lightbearers swelled to 300 members, then 500. Other cells began coordinating their efforts, following Zero's strategies broadcast through hidden Vox channels. Governor Varric escalated. He declared martial law, quadrupling the Arbites' presence in lower hives. Curfews enforced with lethal prejudice. Anyone caught with Zero's propaganda was executed publicly. The crackdown was savage, efficient, exactly as brutal as Lelouch had calculated. It was also exactly what he needed. In chess, Lelouch told his inner circle, "You sacrifice pieces to control the board." The governor has committed his forces to the underhive. He's pulled Arbites from every precinct across the hive to maintain control down here, which means the upper levels where he lives are now vulnerable. Kale's eyes widened. "You're going to kill him. I'm going to make him obsolete." Lelouch pulled out a detailed schematic of the governor's palace, obtained through bribing a servitor tender. Tomorrow night, during the weekly tithe collection ceremony, Governor Varric will address the nobility in the Grand Cathedral. Every aristocrat, every merchant prince, every person who profits from the underhive's suffering will be there. That's where I'll take him. Security will be impossible to breach. I don't need to breach it. Lelouch's Geass eye gleamed. I just need eye contact with one person who has access. The rest will follow. The plan was intricate, layered with contingencies and misdirection. The game pieces were moving. The board was set. Governor Varric had made the fatal mistake of treating this as a military operation rather than what it truly was, a revolution built on inevitability itself. Zero was coming. And the Imperium had no idea how to fight an enemy who turned their own certainty into a weapon. The Grand Cathedral of Tertium rose 30 kilometers above the underhive, a monument to the Imperium's Gothic grandeur. Stained glass windows depicted the Emperor's conquest, each panel worth more than an entire underhive district's annual production. Gold leaf-covered towering columns. Servo skulls floated through incense-thick air, their augmetic eyes recording devotions for the ecclesiarchy's archives. Here, the planetary elite gathered to demonstrate their piety and reinforce the hierarchy that kept them comfortable while billions below suffered. Governor Varric stood at the grand pulpit, resplendent in ceremonial armor. A mountain of a man, augmented with bionics that whirred softly as he moved. His voice boomed through Vox amplifiers, proclaiming the Emperor's will and his divine right to govern. Lelouch watched from the shadows of the cathedral's maintenance passages, having infiltrated through a service entrance using Geass on a low-level attendant. The command had been simple: bring me inside and forget you saw me. The man had obeyed perfectly, leading Lelouch through the labyrinth of passages servants used to remain invisible to their betters. Getting to Varric directly was impossible. The governor was surrounded by bodyguards, heavily armed Arbites in carapace armor, each fanatically loyal. But Lelouch didn't need to reach Varric himself. He needed someone close to him, someone with access, someone whose betrayal would be unthinkable until it happened. Captain Matthias Cross, commander of the governor's personal guard. He stood 3 meters from Varric, hand resting on his bolt pistol, eyes scanning the crowd for threats. Lelouch emerged from the shadows during the ceremony's climax, when all eyes were on Varric's proclamation. He moved with practiced precision, timing his approach to coincide with a servo skull's blind spot. 3 steps brought him alongside Cross. "Captain," Lelouch whispered. Cross's head snapped around, hand moving toward his weapon. His eyes met Lelouch's. The Geass activated crimson bird symbol burning in Lelouch's left eye. Reality bent. The cathedral's ambient sound seemed to distort, pressure building in the space between thoughts. For one terrible moment, Lelouch felt something watching. Not Cross, something else. Something vast and curious and hungry beyond measure, staring through the connection the Geass created. The sensation of infinite eyes observing from impossible angles. Then it was gone, dismissed as quickly as it appeared. Cross's pupils turned purple. Total obedience. "You will wait until the ceremony concludes," Lelouch commanded, voice low and absolute. "Then you will escort Governor Varric to his private chambers. There, you will place your bolt pistol to his head and inform him that his rule ends tonight. You will not harm him unless he resists. You will hold this position until I arrive. You will obey." "I obey," Cross repeated, voice flat. Lelouch vanished back into the shadows before anyone noticed the exchange. The Geass left him momentarily dizzy each use, creating that unsettling sensation of reality warping, of something noticing the disturbance. He'd worry about it later. Right now, the plan was in motion. The ceremony concluded with traditional benedictions. The nobility dispersed to their various indulgences. Varric, flanked by his guards, retired to his private quarters. Cross followed, as he had every night for 3 decades. The governor trusted him absolutely. That trust died when Cross leveled the bolt pistol at his master's skull. "Matthias?" Varric's voice carried genuine confusion. "Your rule ends tonight, Governor." Cross's voice was emotionless, puppet following its master's script. "Do not resist." The other guards moved to intervene. Cross's finger tightened on the trigger. "Stand down, or I paint these walls with his brain matter." They froze. A bolt pistol at this range would pulp Varric's skull. Augmented or not, the standoff held for 3 agonizing seconds before Lelouch emerged from a service passage, still wearing his makeshift Zero mask. "Surrender your weapons," Lelouch commanded the guards. "Place them on the floor and back against the wall." Slowly. They hesitated. Cross pressed the pistol harder against Varric's temple. "Obey him." 15 weapons clattered to the floor. The guards backed away, confusion and rage warring on their faces. How had the legendary Captain Cross turned traitor? What corruption had seized his mind? Lelouch approached Varric, studying the governor with cold analytical precision. 3 million people live in Tertium's underhive. You've diverted their food supplies for 6 months to fund your expansion of the upper hive's luxury districts. 12,000 died of starvation in that time. The Medicaid reports you suppressed listed malnutrition as a contributing factor. "I don't answer to terrorists," Varric snarled. "You're right. You answer to the Imperium." "And the Imperium," Lelouch said softly, "is about to learn what you've done." From his coat, Lelouch produced data slates, comprehensive records stolen from the governor's archives by a Geass-controlled administrator. All carefully compiled to document Varric's corruption, not just the starvation, the embezzlement, the falsified tithe reports, the private deals with merchant guilds that violated administratum protocols. "This goes to the Planetary Inquisition," Lelouch explained. "Your rule doesn't end because I killed you. It ends because the Imperium itself will remove you for incompetence and corruption. Your execution will be public, legal, a message to every other governor who believes their position places them above scrutiny." Varric's face purpled with rage. You think the Inquisition will believe some underhive rat over a properly appointed governor? I'll have you flayed alive. Perhaps. Lelouch's eye gleamed. But they'll investigate, and when they do, they'll find everything. You're finished, Governor. The only question is whether you die quickly or slowly. He turned to Cross. Take him to the Arbite's headquarters. Inform the precinct marshal that Governor Varric attempted to execute you for refusing an illegal order. Present these documents as evidence. The Arbites are loyal to imperial law above individual governors. They'll detain him pending inquisitorial investigation. I obey. Cross began marching Varric toward the door. The governor's facade cracked. Wait. We can negotiate. Whatever you want. I want the Imperium to see that tyrants fall when they forget the Emperor protects all of humanity, not just the powerful. Lelouch's voice carried absolute conviction. You're not a person to me, Governor. You're a message. Cross dragged Varric from the chamber. The other guards remained frozen, uncertain whether to attack the masked revolutionary or process what they'd witnessed. Lelouch had already vanished into the service passages, leaving only Zero's symbol scratched into the wall, a crimson mark that would spread across every district by morning. The Underhive erupted in celebration when the news spread. Governor Varric, detained by his own Arbites on charges of corruption and heresy against the Emperor's will. The tyrant fallen, the revolution victorious. Lelouch allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before reality intruded. This was one hive on one planet in a galaxy of 1,000,000 worlds. The Imperium would appoint a new governor. The cycle would continue, but the people had seen that resistance was possible, that tyrants could fall. That was worth the risk. In the shadows of his hidden sanctum, Lelouch's left eye throbbed. That sensation again, of being watched by something impossibly vast and patient. He dismissed it. Paranoia. Stress. Nothing more. He was wrong. The Arbites came in force, not to celebrate, to purge. Lelouch had calculated the Imperium's response to Varric's fall. He'd expected investigations, bureaucratic delays, perhaps a new governor appointed after months of administrative processing. He'd underestimated the fundamental nature of the Imperium of Man. It didn't negotiate with rebellion. It didn't tolerate dissent. It responded to defiance with overwhelming, brutal, absolute force. 3 days after Varric's detention, Arbite's reinforcements arrived from orbital stations, 5,000 shock troops in full combat armor, backed by sentinels and armored transports. The new acting governor, Lady Commissar Helena Varric, issued one proclamation. The Underhive sheltered traitors. It will be cleansed. The purge began at dawn. Lelouch watched from a high vantage point as Arbite squads swept through the lower levels with military precision. They weren't hunting specific rebels. They were executing entire districts. Anyone who'd celebrated Varric's fall. Anyone who distributed Zero's propaganda. Anyone suspected of collaboration. The guilty and innocent died together because the Imperium made no distinction. If you lived in a rebellious sector, you were complicit. Shock malls cracked skulls. Shotguns roared in confined spaces. Buildings were doused in promethium and set ablaze. Residents trapped inside as servitor-controlled flamers ensured nothing survived. The screaming lasted for hours. Kyle found Lelouch in their safe house, face ashen. They're killing everyone, not just light-bearers, everyone. Children, elderly, people who had nothing to do with us. I see it. Lelouch's voice was carefully neutral, but his hands trembled. This wasn't like Britannia, when he'd orchestrated assassinations or military strikes. There had been precision, targets, strategy. This was industrial-scale slaughter, efficient and purposeless beyond demonstrating authority. We have to stop this. With what forces? Lelouch gestured to their meager resources. We have 500 fighters with stubbers and improvised explosives. They have 5,000 trained soldiers with military-grade weapons and armor. A direct confrontation would be suicide. So we hide? Let them murder thousands? We survive, Lelouch said coldly, so we can fight later. Throwing our lives away in futile resistance serves no one. Kale's punch caught him across the jaw, snapping his head sideways. You did this. You started this revolution, promised them freedom, and now they're dying because they believed you. Lelouch tasted blood. She was right. He'd calculated the Imperium's response in terms of Earth's logic. Nations that valued public opinion, that balanced force with diplomacy. But this wasn't Earth. This was a galaxy where the Imperium regularly authorized exterminatus orbital bombardment that sterilized entire planets. What were a few 100,000 Underhive dwellers compared to that? I made a mistake, Lelouch admitted quietly. I treated the Imperium like Britannia. It isn't. It's worse. It doesn't care about public opinion because it controls all information. It doesn't fear rebellion because it has crushed 10,000 uprisings across 1 million worlds. We can't fight this with conventional revolution. Then what do we do? Before Lelouch could answer, explosions rocked the safe house. Arbites had triangulated their location through surviving Vox traffic. Breaching charges blew through walls. Shock grenades detonated, disorienting everyone inside. The assault was perfectly executed. Arbites in carapace armor stormed through smoke, shotguns booming. Lightbearers returned fire desperately, their crude weapons barely scratching the heavy armor. Lelouch saw 3 rebels cut down in seconds, their bodies torn apart by massed gunfire. Fall back, Kale screamed, pulling Lelouch toward the emergency exit. They fled through the Underhive's maze-like passages, Arbites pursuing with methodical efficiency. The enforcers didn't rush, they sealed exits, coordinated through Vox networks, herded their prey into kill zones. This was their territory. They'd spent decades learning every passage, every hiding spot. The Lightbearers had no advantage here. Lelouch's analytical mind raced. The Geass could turn individual Arbites, but there were too many, moving in tight formations that prevented isolated encounters. His tactical genius meant nothing when outgunned and outnumbered 50 to 1. He'd played chess against the Imperium and discovered the board was actually a slaughterhouse. They emerged into a massive industrial space, an abandoned Prometheum refinery, chains and machinery hanging like metal entrails. 30 Lightbearers had retreated here, including Kale's lieutenants. They formed a desperate defensive position as Arbites sealed the exits. A Vox-amplified voice echoed through the space. Surrender. You will be given the Emperor's mercy. Quick deaths. Resist, and we'll make examples. The Emperor's mercy. Kyle laughed bitterly. That's a fucking joke. Lelouch analyzed their position. No escape routes. Limited ammunition. Against professional soldiers who could afford to wait them out. They were dead. All of them. And it was his fault, his arrogance, his belief that intelligence alone could overcome any obstacle. Then his left eye erupted in agony. The pain was exquisite, reality-bending, as if something was tearing through the fabric of existence, using his Geass as an anchor point. For one terrible moment, he saw beyond the refinery, saw the warp itself, roiling impossibly behind reality's skin. Shapes moved in that chaos, vast and alien and conscious. One of them was looking directly at him. The voice spoke in colors that weren't colors, sounds that existed between thoughts. Such delicious scheming, such beautiful betrayal, such beautiful betrayal, such beautiful. I have watched your gambits, little pawn, and I am intrigued. Would you like real power? Would you like to win your unwinnable war? No, Lelouch gasped. I don't know what you are, but I am Tsinch, the architect of fate, the changer of ways. Your Geass is but a shadow of true power. Accept my blessing, and you will reshape this galaxy according to your will. All I ask is that you continue playing, continue scheming, entertain me with your brilliance. The offer was seductive. Power to actually fight the Imperium, to protect his followers, to win. Whatever this entity was, it wasn't offering salvation, it was offering damnation with strategic benefits. I refuse. Then die, fool. Die with your followers, unmourned and forgotten in a galaxy that never knew you lived. The presence withdrew. The pain vanished. Lelouch found himself on the floor, Kyle shaking his shoulders desperately. The Arbites were preparing to storm their position. Moments remained. Lelouch's eye caught movement, a single Arbites officer approaching their barricade, separated from his unit by the refinery's layout. Close enough for eye contact. One command. One chance. The Geass flared. The officer's eyes met his through gaps in the machinery. Order your forces to stand down, Lelouch commanded. Tell them the rebels have triggered promethium explosives rigged throughout the refinery. A firefight will ignite the fumes and kill everyone in a 5-kilometer radius. Negotiate safe passage for evacuation. Liver. The officer turned, voxing the message. Confusion rippled through the Arbites' ranks. Their sensors detected residual promethium in the air, the refinery's legacy. The bluff was plausible enough to create hesitation. In that hesitation, Lelouch and the survivors fled through a maintenance tunnel the Arbites had overlooked. Behind them, the Imperium's forces realized the deception and renewed pursuit, but precious minutes had been gained. They emerged 2 kilometers away, scattered and bloodied. Of the 30 who'd made that last stand, 12 survived. The Lightbearers, once 500 strong, were effectively destroyed. The revolution was crushed. Lelouch sat in the ruins of his ambitions, watching smoke rise from burning districts. He'd lost, completely. The Imperium had demonstrated the vast gulf between tactical genius and overwhelming force. Worse, he'd been tempted by whatever that thing was, had felt the pull of accepting power that would corrupt absolutely. What now? Kale asked quietly, sitting beside him. Now, Lelouch said, I learned the real rules of this galaxy, and I find another way to fight. Above them, watching from a black storm tower, an Inquisitor observed the carnage through scopes and adjusted his psi sensors. They detected unusual warp resonance during the refinery standoff. An unsanctioned psyker was operating in the underhive, one who'd resisted chaos corruption despite direct exposure to a greater power's attention. Inquisitor Vladek smiled thinly. Such individuals were rare, valuable. The Ordo Malleus would be very interested in this Zero. The visions began 3 days after the refinery. Lelouch would close his eyes and see impossible geometries, towers that spiraled through dimensions that shouldn't exist, staircases leading to their own beginnings, doors opening into themselves, colors that had no names, sounds that tasted like copper and ambition, and always watching from angles his mind couldn't process. The presence that called itself Tsench. He recognized manipulation. The entity was patient, insidious, working not through direct compulsion, but through erosion. Each vision showed him possibilities, timelines where he accepted the power, reshaped the Imperium according to rational principles, ended the suffering through supreme authority, utopias built on foundations of damnation. Lelouch found Kyle and the survivors hiding in the deepest underhive levels, where even Arbites patrols rarely ventured. The remnants of the Lightbearers had scattered, some captured and executed, others vanished into the hive's anonymous masses. Only the most loyal remained 11 souls who still believed Zero could somehow salvage this catastrophe. You look like shit, Kale observed as Lelouch entered their makeshift shelter. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hands trembled constantly now, residual effects of that warp exposure. I'm being hunted, Lelouch said flatly. Not by the Arbites, by something worse. He explained the visions, the entity's offers, the feeling of being constantly observed by an intelligence that thought in plots within plots within plots. Kyle listened with growing horror. Kyle listened with growing horror. That's chaos, she whispered. The ruinous powers. We're taught about them in Emperor's catechisms. Daemons that live in the warp, corrupt souls, promise power and deliver damnation. Her voice hardened. You can't accept, no matter what it offers. I know. Lelouch's laugh was bitter. I've spent my life fighting tyrants. I won't become a different kind of monster just to win faster. But the temptation gnawed. In the Underhive's darkness, surrounded by the consequences of his failed revolution, Lelouch wrestled with impossible mathematics. The Imperium was too vast, too entrenched, too brutal to fight conventionally. Without overwhelming power, any resistance was futile. But accepting that power meant becoming exactly what he despised, a tyrant, wielding absolute authority, justified by claiming to serve a greater good. The fourth night, the vision changed. Instead of towers and geometries, Lelouch found himself in a throne room that existed in 9 dimensions simultaneously. The architect of fate manifested not as a creature, but as a concept, wearing flesh, constantly shifting between forms. A scholar, a daemon, a savior, a horror. Still you resist, Tzeentch said, voice like crystalline laughter. How delightfully stubborn. But look around you. Little schemer, your followers suffer. The Imperium crushes them slowly. Every hour you delay, another innocent dies. Is your pride worth their agony? This isn't about pride. Lelouch met the entity's ever-changing gaze. It's about understanding what you are. You don't offer power. You offer addiction. One compromise leads to another until there's nothing left of who I was. And what were you? Tzeentch leaned forward, 9 mouths speaking simultaneously. A prince who orchestrated his father's death. A revolutionary who sacrificed thousands in calculated gambits. A tyrant who crowned himself emperor to unite the world through hatred of him. You were always willing to become the monster, Lelouch. Why stop now? The words struck home because they were true. Zero Requiem had been the ultimate tyranny, controlling humanity so completely that even their hatred served his design. The difference was intention. Lelouch had planned to die, to end the cycle of oppression. Tzeentch offered eternal scheming, plots without end, manipulation as fundamental purpose. I chose to die, Lelouch said quietly. That was the point. Absolute power, then absolute sacrifice. You're offering me the power without the sacrifice. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. Tzeentch laughed, the sound echoing through impossible dimensions. All power is a trap. All authority corrupts. All victory sows seeds of future defeat. That's what makes existence beautiful. The eternal dance of rise and fall. Scheme and counter-scheme. Hope and despair cycling forever. Then I reject the dance. You already accepted it the moment you used that Geass. That eye. Such clever theft of power. Such delicious hubris. Every time you command obedience, you taste what I offer. Every time you bend another's will, you worship at my altar without knowing it. Lelouch's blood ran cold. The Geass is connected to you? Not to me specifically. To the warp itself. The realm of souls and will and emotion. Your power works because reality here is more flexible. But flexibility cuts both ways. Use it too much, and you'll tear holes in the world through which far worse things than I will crawl. The vision ended. Lelouch woke, gasping, Kale shaking him. You were screaming, she said, talking to something that wasn't here. The Geass is dangerous, Lelouch explained, more than I realized. Every time I use it, I risk contamination, drawing attention from things that exist beyond conventional reality. Then stop using it. If I do, we have no advantage. We're just underhive rats with delusions of revolution. Lelouch rubbed his throbbing eye. I need to understand this galaxy's rules. The Imperium. The warp. How power actually functions here. I've been playing chess while everyone else plays a game I don't even know the name of. Footsteps echoed through the shelter. The survivors reached for weapons, but the figure who emerged from the shadows wore black carapace armor, marked with an ornate eye, the symbol of the Inquisition. Inquisitor Vladek was a thin man with augmetic eyes that whirred as they focused. He moved with predatory grace, bolt pistol holstered but hand resting near it. Behind him, a retinue of stormtroopers in void-sealed armor secured the perimeter. "Zero," Vladek said, voice carrying cultured authority. "Or should I call you Lelouch v. Britannia?" "Yes, we've been investigating. Your Geass leaves. Traces. Psychic residue. Quite fascinating." Lelouch stood slowly, mind racing through escape scenarios. "None viable. If you're here to execute me, get it over with." "Execute you?" Vladek smiled thinly. "Throne? No. You're far too valuable. You're an unsanctioned psyker who demonstrated remarkable resistance to chaos corruption despite direct exposure to a greater power. Do you understand how rare that is? Most mortals would have been gibbering chaos spawn within minutes." End quote. One-sided. End quote. End quote. One-sided quote. End 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 quote. "I'm not a psyker. The Geass is a psychic gift disguised as something else. Semantics." Vladek circled Lelouch like a predator, assessing prey. "Here's what interests me. You started a revolution using manipulation and tactics rather than raw psychic force. You achieved more with 500 rebels than most cult leaders manage with 10,000. And when Tsinch himself offered you power, you refused. How do you know? Because I was watching." Vladek tapped his augmetic eyes. "These aren't just cybernetics. They see into the warp itself. I observed your entire conversation with the Architect of Fate, recorded it for analysis. Your resistance wasn't luck, it was calculated rejection based on understanding the trap. That suggests a functional intellect, rather than mindless fanaticism." Kale moved to interpose herself between Vladek and Lelouch. "You're here to take him, yes, but not to kill." Vladek's expression remained neutral. "I'm offering recruitment. The Ordo Malleus, the Daemon Hunters, has use for someone with his talents. Your Geass, properly trained and monitored, could be an asset in fighting chaos corruption. And in exchange, I offer you what you truly want. Leverage against the Imperium's injustices. I don't trust you. Smart. You shouldn't." Vladek's smile widened slightly. "But consider your alternatives. Continue hiding in the Underhive until the Arbites find you, or until Tsinch's corruption overwhelms your resistance. Both end with death or damnation." Or he extended a hand. "Work with someone who understands the galaxy's real rules and might actually teach you how to fight effectively. Or, Lelouch studied the Inquisitor. Everything about this screamed trap. But Vladek was right about one thing: staying in the Underhive meant slow death. And despite everything, Lelouch's core drive remained. Understand the system, find its weaknesses, exploit them. He couldn't do that from a position of complete ignorance. What would this recruitment entail? Training, evaluation, missions under my direct supervision. If you prove trustworthy and competent, sanctioning as an official inquisitorial operative. If you prove corrupted or treacherous, execution." Vladek's voice held no emotion. The Inquisition doesn't offer second chances, but it does offer purpose. Lelouch glanced at Kale, at the survivors who'd followed him through catastrophe. They deserved better than death in the Underhive. What happens to them? They go free. The Lightbearers are officially disbanded. The Arbites have stopped actively hunting survivors. Governor Varric's corruption charges were legitimate. Even if your methods were heretical, The Imperium will allow this to fade into bureaucratic obscurity. I want guarantees. You're in no position to negotiate, Vladik interrupted. But I'll offer this. The choice was brutal, clear, utterly pragmatic. This was how the Imperium functioned, not through inspiration or hope, but through calculated threat and transactional loyalty. I accept, Lelouch said. On one condition. You teach me everything about this galaxy. The warp, chaos, the Imperium structure, how power actually works here. No more stumbling blind. Vladik extended his hand. Knowledge is the Inquisition's true currency. Welcome to the Ordo Malleus, Lelouch. Let's see if your tactical genius survives first contact with reality. They shook. Lelouch felt the weight of new chains settling around his soul, different from Tsiench's corruption, but equally binding. He traded one cage for another, but this cage had doors, and Lelouch had always been talented at finding exits. The Inquisitorial Fortress was built into Tertium's orbital station, a massive structure of reinforced adamantium and sanctified stone that served as Vladik's base of operations. Lelouch was escorted through corridors lined with servo skulls and purity seals, past cells where suspected heretics screamed during interrogations. The architecture spoke of controlled paranoia. Blast doors every 20 meters, gun servitors tracking all movement, prayer scrolls covering every surface, as if faith itself could ward off corruption. They brought him to a chamber that was part laboratory, part torture room, part chapel. Vladik gestured to a throne-like chair covered in monitoring equipment. Sit. We need to understand exactly what your Geass is before determining how dangerous you truly are. Lelouch complied. Dozens of sensors attaching to his skull, chest, and arms. Tech priests in red robes muttered prayers to the machine god as they calibrated instruments that looked like a fusion of medieval torture devices and advanced scanning technology. One wore an augmetic that clicked rhythmically as it analyzed Lelouch's biometric data. The Imperium has encountered psychic phenomena for 10,000 years, Vladik explained, watching displays that tracked Lelouch's brain activity in ways that shouldn't be medically possible. We understand psychers, individuals who can touch the warp and channel its power. Sanctioned psychers are soul-bound to the Emperor, creating a psychic tether that prevents daemon possession. You, however, are something different. I'm not a psyker, Lelouch insisted. The Geass doesn't draw from, activate it. Vladik gestured to a servitor, a lobotomized human converted into a flesh robot. Command it to do something. Let's observe what actually happens. Lelouch met the servitor's glassy eyes. The Geass flared. Raise your right hand. The servitor complied, but the instruments went mad, alarms shrieking, displays showing spikes in localized warp disturbance. For one frame captured by high-speed recording equipment, reality around Lelouch's eye became translucent, revealing something writhing behind the material world. Vladik studied the data with disturbing intensity. Fascinating. Your Geass doesn't channel warp energy like traditional psychers. Instead, it creates micro-breaches in reality, temporary holes, through which your will imposes itself directly onto another's consciousness. No wonder Tsench noticed you. You're essentially punching reality every time you use that power. Punching reality, Lelouch repeated flatly. That sounds bad. It is. Each use creates scarring in the immaterium wounds that attract demonic attention, like blood attracts predators. Use it sparingly, and the damage heals. Use it repeatedly in short periods, and you'll create permanent tears that demons can crawl through. Vladik disconnected the monitoring equipment, which means your power has a practical limit. Approximately 5 uses per day before the risk becomes critical. 5 uses. Lelouch's tactical mind immediately began calculating how to maximize each command's impact, how to structure operations around such severe limitations. What happens if I exceed that? Demonic manifestation, warp spawn, possession, maybe just madness as your consciousness dissolves into the immaterium. Vladik spoke with clinical detachment. I've seen unsanctioned psychers burn themselves out. Their eyes melt. Their skin splits as demonic essence pours through. They die screaming in languages that predate human civilization. Ontin's splits of demonic essence problem. I've entist, Ontin's brain creased, Ontin's protect, Ontin splits of demonic, Ontin's protective demonic. Encouraging. It's meant to be educational. Vladik pulled up hollow-projected images. Chaos cults. Possessed individuals. Daemon incursions. This is what we fight. The ruinous powers are real, Lelouch. Not metaphors. Not abstract concepts. Real, conscious entities of impossible power that want to corrupt and consume everything that lives. Tzeentch offers you power because watching you struggle with that power entertains him. Every scheme you execute, every manipulation you orchestrate, you're dancing for his amusement whether you intend to or not. Lelouch absorbed this, restructuring his understanding. He'd thought the Imperium was the primary threat, brutal but comprehensible authoritarianism. Existential horror that made conventional tyranny seem almost reasonable by comparison. Why tell me this? Why not just execute me as a chaos threat? Because you rejected Tzeentch. Vladik leaned forward. Do you understand how rare that is? I've interrogated thousands of suspected cultists. I've witnessed firsthand how chaos corrupts. Most fall immediately when offered power. The strong resist briefly before compromising. The exceptional might hold out for weeks before inevitable corruption. You, a complete outsider with no understanding of chaos, instinctively recognized the trap and refused. That suggests either unprecedented willpower or genuine incorruptibility. Or I'm just stubborn. Stubbornness against chaos is a virtue. Vladik stood. Which brings us to your training. If you're to be useful to the Ordo Malleus, you need to understand what you're fighting. Not theory, practical experience. We're going to throw you into the fire and see if you burn or harden. They moved to a secure vault deep in the fortress's bowels. Vladik inputted a sequence of codes, passed through multiple checkpoints guarded by zealous stormtroopers, and finally unsealed a door covered in psychic wards and purity seals. Inside was a chaos cultist. The man, or what remained of him, was chained to a blessed iron throne. Mutations covered his body. Extra eyes. Amanda. 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 Tentacles where fingers should be. Skin that shifted between colors that shouldn't exist. He was barely conscious, drooling and muttering in a language that hurt to hear. This is Marcus Krell, Vladik explained. Former Imperial Guard officer. Exposed to chaos corruption during a campaign in the Eye of Terror. He's been interrogated extensively, but the daemon inside him is remarkably resilient. Lelouch stared at the horror. You want me to command a daemon? I want you to understand that chaos doesn't play by rules. Your Geass works on human will. What happens when you try to command something that isn't human? That doesn't have a conventional consciousness? Let's find out. Every instinct screamed this was dangerous. But Lelouch had accepted Vladik's deal knowledge in exchange for service, and understanding his power's limits was crucial. He stepped closer. The cultists' eyes, all 7 of them, focused on Lelouch with disturbing clarity. The Geass activated. Tell me your master's name. Reality shattered. The Geass connected not to Marcus Krell's consciousness, but to the daemon possessing him. For one infinite microsecond, Lelouch touched something that existed beyond sanity. A fragment of chaos given malevolent awareness. It laughed in colors that tasted like despair. It showed him futures where he'd already fallen. Pasts that never happened. Presents that couldn't exist. 9,000 possibilities collapsed into one moment of absolute certainty. He was food. Entertainment. A toy for entities that thought in eternities. Then Vladik's servo skull fired a psychic dampener. The connection severed. Lelouch collapsed. Blood pouring from his nose. Eye burning with agony. that transcended physical pain. What? Lelouch gasped. Was that, Vladek said calmly, was a lesser daemon of Tsinch. Your Geass can't command it because it doesn't have will as you understand it. It is will pure, concentrated, chaotic. Attempting to dominate it is like trying to command a hurricane. Lelouch wiped blood from his face, hands shaking. I suspected. I needed to confirm. Vladek helped him stand. Lesson learned. Your power works on mortals, even enhanced humans, like space marines or corrupted cultists. But daemons, tyrannid hive minds, Necron constructs, anything that operates on fundamentally alien consciousness is immune. Your tactical genius remains your true weapon. The Geass is just a tool. Use it wrong, and it destroys you. They left the vault. Lelouch's worldview thoroughly shattered and rebuilt. The Imperium suddenly made horrifying sense. The paranoia, the brutality, the absolute refusal to tolerate deviation. When the alternative was demonic possession and reality-bending horror, maybe fascist theocracy was the least terrible option. You're learning, Vladek observed. I can see it in your eyes. The Imperium isn't good. That's the galaxy's cruelest truth. There are no good choices, only degrees of catastrophe. Lelouch said nothing, but somewhere deep in his mind, a seed of understanding took root. He couldn't fight the Imperium the way he'd fought Britannia. This wasn't political revolution, it was survival against existential annihilation. His tactics would need to adapt. His goals would need to change. Or would they? Lelouch had always been talented at finding third options when presented with binary choices. The Imperium and chaos weren't the only possibilities. There had to be another way. When Dakama, he just needed time to find it. Your first mission begins tomorrow, Vladek said. We've detected a chaos cult operating in Tertium's mid-hive. You'll accompany my kill team to root them out. Consider it your final exam. Succeed and you'll be sanctioned. Fail, and I die. I understand. Lelouch met Vladek's augmetic gaze. I won't fail. We'll see. Tsinch hasn't given up on you yet. Every mission is a temptation. Every victory, a potential path to damnation. The Inquisition will be watching to ensure you remain useful rather than becoming another threat to purge. Lelouch was escorted to minimal quarters, a cell with a cot, basic amenities, and a single book, the Imperial Infantryman's uplifting primer. Propaganda, probably. But information was information. As he read, Lelouch's left eye throbbed rhythmically. Somewhere beyond reality, Tsinch watched and planned and waited with infinite patience. The game was just beginning. The Mid-Hive cult called themselves the Enlightened Believers, that the Emperor had abandoned humanity, that only through chaos could true freedom be achieved. They operated from a converted textile factory, hiding among legitimate workers, spreading their corruption slowly through promises of liberation from the Imperium's grinding oppression. Vladek's intelligence suggested 30 cultists, perhaps a few minor daemons, nothing a skilled kill team couldn't handle. Intelligence was wrong. Lelouch descended with the inquisitorial retinue, 8 stormtroopers in void-sealed carapace armor, a sanctioned psyker named Drusilla whose third eye leaked perpetual tears, and Vladek himself wielding a force sword that crackled with psychic energy. They breached the factory at midnight, expecting resistance. What they found was a full-scale summoning ritual. The factory floor had been transformed into a blasphemous cathedral. Hundreds of cultists chanted in unison, their voices harmonizing in frequencies that made reality shudder. At the ritual's center, a geometrically impossible portal yawned a tear into the warp, through which shapes that hurt to perceive began emerging. Daemons of Tsinch, flamers vomiting warp fire. Emperor's throne. Vladek breathed. That's a herald. If it manifests fully, this entire hive sector becomes a daemon world. We need to collapse the ritual, Drusilla said, her voice strained. The summoning requires 8 focal points, cult leaders channeling psychic energy. Kill them, and the portal destabilizes. Lelouch's tactical mind went into overdrive. The factory floor was massive, 300 meters long, filled with machinery providing cover. The cultists were positioned defensively, protecting their leaders with layers of expendable fanatics. A frontal assault would take too long. They needed precision strikes on critical targets while preventing the Herald's manifestation. I can see the focal points, Drusilla continued, pointing to cult leaders marked by glowing sigils on their foreheads. There, and Emperor preserve us. They're spreading out to maximize ritual stability. Then we divide their attention. Lelouch turned to Vladik. Your stormtroopers split into 4 pairs. Create diversionary attacks from multiple angles. Make them think we're attempting a standard breach and clear. While they're focused on your soldiers, I'll use Geass to turn one focal point against the others. Vladik's augmetic eyes whirred, calculating. Risky. If the cultists realize one of their leaders is compromised, they'll execute him and replace him with a backup. Not if he acts naturally until the critical moment. Lelouch's Geass eye gleamed. I command obedience, not puppet behavior. He'll seem completely loyal until I need him to strike. And what about demon manifestation? The horrors are already emerging. They'll tear through anything human. Then we adapt. Your psyker suppresses the portal while your soldiers contain the daemons. I'll handle the human elements. Trust me, I've fought impossible odds before. Vladik studied Lelouch for 3 seconds, then nodded. Do it. But if this fails, I'm calling orbital bombardment. Better to lose this sector than let a herald establish a foothold. The kill team split. Stormtroopers advanced in disciplined pairs, their hellguns creating precise patterns of suppressing fire. Cultists returned fire with autoguns and improvised weapons, fanaticism compensating for poor training. Drusilla began chanting counter-rituals, her psychic might wrestling with the summoning's momentum. Warp fire illuminated the factory in nauseating colors. Lelouch moved through the chaos with calculated precision. The Geass had a range limitation, approximately 30 meters, for reliable eye contact. He needed to get close to a focal point without being noticed by hundreds of armed fanatics willing to die for their dark gods. A pink horror bounded toward him, its flesh constantly shifting between impossible forms. Lelouch dodged behind industrial machinery as warp fire splashed where he'd stood, metal melting like wax. One of Vladik's stormtroopers incinerated the daemon with a heavy flamer, the promethium-fueled flames actually burning the warp entity. Sector 3 compromised. A stormtrooper voxed. Blue horrors replicating faster than we can kill them. Hold position. Vladik's force sword cleaved through a horror, psychic energy preventing it from splitting. Drusilla, how long until portal collapse? 10 minutes if uninterrupted, but they're reinforcing the ritual. I count 12 focal points now, not 8. The situation was deteriorating. Lelouch reached cover near the northern focal point, a cultist marked by a tentacle mutation where his left arm should be. The man chanted in languages that predated human civilization, eyes glazed with religious ecstasy. Eye contact. The Geass activated. For a moment, reality bent. Lelouch felt that familiar sensation of Tzeentch watching, amused by this rebellion against his summoning. Then the command took hold. Continue the ritual until I signal, Lelouch commanded. When I tap my mask twice, kill the 3 nearest focal points with whatever weapon you have. Make it look like demonic corruption drove you mad. After eliminating them, die fighting. The cultist's eyes flashed purple. I obey. Lelouch moved on. 5 Geass uses remaining today. He needed to maximize impact, turn multiple focal points at strategic moments to create cascading ritual failure. But each use drew attention from the warp itself. Already, he could feel pressure building behind his eye. as if something was pushing back against his interference. A cultist spotted him, raising an autogun. Before he could fire, one of Vladik's stormtroopers put a hellgun round through his skull. The trooper gave Lelouch a curt nod, professional competence recognizing tactical necessity. Lelouch reached the second focal point, a woman whose skin had turned entirely to eyes, each one blinking independently. The Geass worked again, another command given. When the ritual destabilizes, redirect your psychic energy into the portal itself. Overload it from within. The woman nodded without breaking her chant. The herald was emerging, now a monstrosity of crystalline wings and impossible geometry, its mere presence causing reality to fracture. Stormtroopers fell, screaming, as their minds couldn't process what they were seeing. Drusilla's chants intensified, blood pouring from all three of her eyes as she wrestled with the summoning. "Portal manifestation at 70%, she screamed. "Vladik, we're out of time." Vladik reached the third focal point and simply decapitated him with his force sword, redirecting energy flows. But it bought Lelouch precious seconds. He reached the third and fourth focal points, twins, whose flesh had merged into a single mass of shared consciousness. The Geass worked on both simultaneously, one command binding them. When the ritual falters, attack each other. Believe the other has been corrupted by rival chaos powers. 4 uses. 1 remaining. The herald was nearly through now, its voice speaking in colors. Futile resistance. This world belongs to the architect now. Your struggles entertain, but outcomes are inevitable. Lelouch tapped his mask twice. The northern focal point screamed, suddenly drawing a concealed auto pistol and firing into his nearest colleagues. 3 cult leaders died before anyone realized what was happening. The ritual shuddered, energy flows disrupting. The woman with eye-covered skin redirected her power into the portal itself, creating feedback that made the herald shriek in languages that shattered glass. The twins attacked each other, their shared flesh tearing as psychic warfare erupted between them. The summoning collapsed. The portal imploded, sucking daemons back into the warp with howls of frustrated rage. The herald was pulled halfway through before reality sealed, its bisected form collapsing into warp stuff that evaporated like toxic steam. Cultists who'd been channeling energy simply exploded, their bodies unable to contain the backlash. Silence fell, broken only by burning machinery and dying screams. Vladik surveyed the carnage, expression unreadable. Acceptable casualties: 2 stormtroopers dead, 3 wounded. Drusilla unconscious but alive. The factory sector is contained. His augmetic eyes focused on Lelouch. Your tactical approach was effective. Lelouch removed his mask, exhaustion evident. We prevented the herald. That's what mattered. Yes, but you used the Geass 4 times in rapid succession. The warp disturbance attracted significant demonic attention. If we hadn't collapsed the ritual when we did, you'd have become a beacon for every chaos entity within light years. Vladik's voice hardened. Effective, but reckless. You're learning the galaxy's rules, but not yet respecting them. I respected them enough to win. Winning is insufficient. Surviving matters more. Vladik gestured to the remaining cultists, dozens, surrendering now that their leaders were dead. We'll interrogate survivors. Determine if this was isolated or part of larger chaos operations. You'll assist. Consider it practice in understanding how corruption spreads. The interrogations were brutal. Lelouch watched as inquisitorial methods extracted information through pain, drugs, and psychic intrusion. The cultists had believed genuinely in their cause, freedom from the Imperium's tyranny through Chaos's gifts. They'd accepted mutations, demon possession, eventual damnation because it seemed preferable to grinding oppression. Lelouch understood their logic, hated it, but understood it. You see the problem now, Vladik said quietly, as another cultist was dragged to execution. The Imperium creates the conditions that make chaos attractive: suffering, oppression, hopelessness. These are Chaos's greatest recruiting tools. And the Imperium, in fighting Chaos, perpetuates the very conditions that create more Chaos worshippers. It's a cycle without end. Then the system is broken. The system is the only thing preventing extinction. Vladik's voice carried absolute conviction. The Imperium is cruel, oppressive, unjust, and absolutely necessary, because the alternative isn't freedom. It's daemon worlds where reality itself ceases functioning. Lelouch said nothing, but the seed of an idea began forming. The Imperium and Chaos weren't the only options. There had to be a third path, one that preserved humanity without enabling cosmic horror. He just needed to find it. His eye throbbed. Tzeentch was still watching, still waiting, still patient, but so was Lelouch. And patience was a skill he'd mastered long ago. 6 months of missions followed. Lelouch became Vladik's primary tactical asset, the operative deployed when situations required manipulation rather than brute force. He infiltrated a gene-stealer cult, using Geass to turn the Patriarch's most trusted advisor into a saboteur. He negotiated with a rogue tech priest who discovered forbidden archaeotech, convincing the man to surrender peacefully rather than forcing orbital bombardment. He orchestrated the capture of a Chaos sorcerer by convincing the sorcerer's own bodyguards to turn on their master. Each mission taught him more about the galaxy's brutal mathematics. The Imperium functioned on calculated sacrifice, kill billions to save trillions, execute thousands to prevent demonic incursion, torture innocents to extract information that might prevent sector-wide catastrophe. It wasn't good. It was necessary. And necessity, Lelouch learned, was the Imperium's only virtue. He'd been sanctioned, now officially recognized as an inquisitorial operative with clearance to carry weapons and authority to command in Vladik's name. The left side of his chest bore a purity seal, blessed by an ecclesiarchy priest, to ward off corruption. He wore it with bitter irony, a symbol of faith in an emperor he didn't worship, protection against damnation he'd already brushed against. Then Tertium sector came under actual attack. The warning came via astropathic scream, a psychic message from a neighboring system. The Great Rift had vomited forth a Chaos warband. The Crimson Prophets, word-bearers, traitors who'd spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of corrupting Imperial worlds. 3 battle barges, estimated 5,000 Chaos Space Marines. Objective: convert Tertium into a daemon world and use it as a staging ground for further incursions. Governor Varric, who'd replaced the corrupt Varric, mobilized the planetary defense forces. 3 million Imperial Guard regiments, orbital defense platforms, PDF ground forces, the Arbites. It seemed sufficient against a mere 5,000 enemies. Then the Crimson Prophets made planetfall. Lelouch watched from an observation deck as drop pods slammed into Tertium's surface like meteors. Each pod contained Chaos Space Marines, genetically enhanced super soldiers wearing power armor and wielding weapons that could pulp tanks. They weren't human anymore. They were walking tanks, each one worth 100 guardsmen in combat. The first Imperial Guard regiment to engage them was annihilated in 17 minutes. Emperor's throne, Vladik breathed, watching tactical displays. They're not just attacking, they're performing rituals. Every guardsman they kill, every civilian they slaughter, feeds power into summoning circles. They're converting the entire hive into a demonic gateway. How long until completion? Lelouch asked, mind already racing through scenarios. 48 hours if unopposed, maybe 72 if we mount effective resistance. But look at the disposition they've seized the planetary defense platforms. Orbital support is offline. We're trapped planetside with no way to call reinforcements before the ritual completes. The situation was impossible. 5,000 Chaos Space Marines against 3 million guardsmen sounded favorable. But each Marine was a veteran of 10,000 years of continuous warfare, enhanced to near invulnerability, wielding weapons that predated the Imperium itself. They could fight for days without rest, shrug off wounds that would kill normal humans, and call upon demonic allies when pressed. We can't win a conventional engagement, Lelouch said. We need to disrupt the ritual. The ritual has 8 focal points, one for each great company in the warband. They're distributed across the hive, each protected by 500 Marines. Even if we had the forces to assault one focal point, the others would compensate. Vladik's expression was grim. Evacuation is impossible. Exterminatus is the only solution: orbital bombardment to sterilize the planet before the ritual completes. I've already requested authorization from Segmentum Command. You're going to kill 8 billion people to prevent a daemon world that would threaten the entire subsector. Vladik met Lelouch's gaze. This is the Imperium's calculus. Sacrifice one world to save 10. It's not good. It's necessary. Lelouch's hands clenched. There has to be another way. The Bolflust in Telsti. There isn't. I've fought chaos incursions for 40 years. Once a ritual reaches this scale, only total planetary destruction stops it. Vladik's voice softened slightly. I know this is difficult, but sentiment doesn't survive contact with reality. 8 billion die, or 80 billion die when the daemon world metastasizes. Choose. But Lelouch had never accepted binary choices. Give me command of the Imperial Guard, Lelouch said. Vladik laughed, harsh and bitter. You? A sanctioned operative with 6 months' experience? Command 3 million soldiers? Contences. You said I have authority to act in your name. Use it. Grant me tactical command and I'll stop this ritual without exterminatus. How? By doing what the Imperium refuses to sacrifice the right pieces instead of all pieces. Lelouch pulled up tactical displays, fingers flying across the hololithic interface. The Chaos Ritual requires 8 focal points. They've positioned them defensively because they assume we'll attack each one directly, but we don't need to destroy all 8. We just need to disrupt the energy flows connecting them. He highlighted sectors between focal points, critical infrastructure, transit hubs, Promethium refineries. We collapse these sectors. Bury the connecting passages under megatons of rubble. The ritual requires synchronized energy transfer between focal points. Break the synchronization, and the summoning destabilizes. That means condemning everyone in those sectors to death. Hundreds of millions, fewer than 8 billion. Lelouch's voice was cold, clinical. The Chaos Marines won't expect us to sacrifice our own infrastructure. They'll waste time trying to re-establish connections while we execute targeted strikes on isolated focal points. It's brutal. It's ruthless. It works. Vladik studied Lelouch with disturbing intensity. You've changed. 6 months ago, you were horrified by the Imperium's casual brutality. Now you're proposing to murder millions as a tactical gambit. I learned from my teachers. Lelouch met the Inquisitor's augmetic gaze. This galaxy doesn't reward idealism. It rewards results. Give me command, and I'll deliver results. A long silence. Then Vladik activated his Vox. Governor Varak. This is Inquisitor Vladik. By my authority, I'm assuming tactical command of all planetary defense forces and transferring operational control to Operative Lelouch v. Britannia. Any officer who refuses his orders will be executed for heresy. Confirm. The Vox crackled. Confirmed, Inquisitor. May the Emperor guide your servant. Carger. Lelouch now commanded 3 million soldiers. The weight of that responsibility was crushing. Each order he gave would determine who lived and who died. But hesitation was luxury. Chaos didn't wait for moral clarity. First wave. Lelouch addressed the command staff via hololith. Evacuate sectors 12, 45, 67, 89, 103, 124, 156, and 178. You have 4 hours. Anyone remaining after that time frame is considered acceptable casualties. Sir, a guard colonel protested. Those sectors house 40 million civilians. 4 hours isn't. 4 hours is what you have. Prioritize children and functional adults. The elderly, infirm, and criminals are lower priority. Move. The colonel's face paled, but he saluted. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Second wave. Engineering teams rigged the evacuated sectors with explosive charges. Rig them in explosive charges. Rig them explosive charges. Rig them explosive charges. I want total structural collapse. Every transit tunnel, every support pillar, every piece of infrastructure reduced to impassable rubble. That will take. You have 6 hours. Work faster. Lelouch continued issuing orders with mechanical precision. Guard regiments repositioned to defensive lines. Artillery batteries targeted chaos positions, not to kill Marines nearly impossible, but to disrupt their ritual geometry. Sanctioned psychers coordinated counter-rituals to create warp interference. And everywhere, the evacuations proceeded with brutal efficiency. Millions fled through transit systems, while others were simply abandoned. The Guard executed anyone who resisted evacuation. No time for debate, no mercy for delay. Children were torn from parents too slow to move. The disabled were left behind. Efficiency demanded atrocity. Lelouch watched it all from the command center, expression carved from ice. This was the Zero. He'd become the tactician who'd orchestrated his own world's salvation through calculated cruelty. But here, the cruelty was magnitude larger, and the salvation temporary at best. Charges set, an engineering officer reported. Awaiting detonation, authorization. Lelouch checked the chronometer. 23 hours since the chaos assault began. The ritual was progressing reality around the focal points. Already warping. Daemons manifesting in small numbers. Minutes mattered now. Detonate. 8 simultaneous explosions. Entire hive sectors collapsed in on themselves. Megatons of metal and stone creating artificial mountains of rubble. The few civilians remaining were crushed instantly. The Chaos Marines' ritual geometry, shattered energy flows disrupted, synchronization breaking. The Crimson Prophets reacted immediately, attempting to re-establish connections. They'd need days to clear passages or weeks to reroute ritual energies through alternate paths. Third wave, Lelouch commanded. All forces concentrate on isolated focal points. Hit them simultaneously. Maximum force. No regard for casualties. We're trading lives for time. The Guard attacked with suicidal desperation. Regiments threw themselves at entrenched Chaos Marines, dying in thousands but forcing the traitors to commit resources to defense rather than ritual maintenance. Sanctioned psychers dueled Chaos Sorcerers, both sides burning out their minds in psychic warfare. Artillery turned entire districts into crematoriums. The casualties were staggering. 20 million guardsmen dead in 6 hours. Entire hive sectors rendered uninhabitable. But 2 focal points fell, one destroyed when Lelouch used Geass on a chaos cultist to sabotage ritual components from within. Another collapsed when massed artillery created enough psychic disruption to prevent daemon manifestation. The ritual is destabilizing, Drusilla reported, her voice strained from continuous psychic combat. They're trying to compensate, but they've lost too much synchronization. If we can destroy one more focal point in the next 4 hours, the entire summoning fails. Then we have our target. Lelouch highlighted focal point 3 positioned in the upper hive where civilian casualties would be minimal. The final assault was absolute carnage. The Guard attacked in human waves, each wave dying to advance meters against Chaos Marines who killed with casual efficiency. Lelouch committed every resource, tanks, aircraft, even forced labor battalions, armed with nothing but shovels, anything to overwhelm through sheer numerical superiority. He watched from command, counting casualties like chess pieces. 50,000 dead, 100,000, 200,000. Each death meant nothing, except as a number bringing him closer to victory. The focal point fell when Vladik himself led a final assault, his force sword carving through Chaos Marines while stormtroopers died around him. The ritual circle shattered. The summoning collapsed. Chaos across Tertium howled in frustrated rage as their gateway to daemonhood closed. The Crimson Prophets retreated, teleporting back to their battle barges before Imperial retribution could catch them. They'd failed. The planet was saved, at a cost of 120 million dead. Lelouch sat in the silent command center. staring at casualty reports. He'd sacrificed more lives in 3 days than most generals commanded in their entire careers. And he'd done it efficiently, without hesitation, exactly as the Imperium demanded. Vladek entered, covered in blood and promethium residue. The ritual is destroyed. The planet stands. You succeeded. I murdered 100 million people. You saved 8 billion. Vladek's voice carried no judgment. That's the trade the Imperium requires. You made it. Efficiently. Ruthlessly. Exactly as I would have. I'm becoming what I hate. No. You're becoming what's necessary. Vladek sat heavily. Welcome to the Inquisition, Lelouch, where every victory is purchased with atrocity, and the only solace is knowing the alternatives are worse. Lelouch's left eye throbbed. Somewhere in the warp, Tzeentch laughed with colors that tasted like vindication. The mortal had rejected corruption but embraced tyranny anyway. Either way, he danced to the architect's amusement, but Lelouch barely noticed. He was too busy calculating his next move, because he'd learned the galaxy's most important lesson. Power wasn't about good or evil. It was about necessity, and if he was going to change this nightmare universe, he'd need to master necessity itself, even if it damned him in the process. 2 years, 23 missions, 18 sectors saved from chaos, corruption, xenos invasion, or internal rebellion. Lelouch v. Britannia had become one of the Ordo Malleus's most effective operatives, a tactical genius who understood how to fight threats conventional forces couldn't counter. His Geass, used sparingly and strategically, had turned tides in conflicts where brute force would have failed. He'd also become exactly what he'd once despised, a tyrant who ordered executions without hesitation, sanctioned planetary bombardments as acceptable losses, and calculated human lives as tactical resources. The Imperium had forged him into its perfect weapon, intelligent enough to win efficiently, ruthless enough to pay any price for victory, and it was killing him, not physically. The augmetics he'd received after a particularly brutal mission, a bionic right arm replacing one lost to a daemon's claws, functioned perfectly. His health was monitored by the best medikey facilities available. No. The death was slower, spiritual. Each atrocity committed in the Emperor's name, each necessary evil justified by preventing greater horrors, eroded the person he'd been. Lelouch stood before a strategic display in Vladek's sanctum, studying reports from across Segmentum Obscurus. The Great Rift continued hemorrhaging chaos forces. The Imperium responded with its characteristic brutality. Entire worlds abandoned, populations sacrificed. Victories measured in how slowly humanity lost ground. It was endless, exhausting, futile. You're thinking again, Vladek observed, entering with his characteristic predatory grace. That expression, I've seen it before. Usually before you orchestrate something catastrophically risky. The Imperium can't win, Lelouch said quietly. Not like this. We fight holding actions, delay the inevitable, sacrifice billions to buy decades. But chaos grows stronger with every atrocity we commit, every act of desperation that feeds the warp. We're losing. We've been losing for 10,000 years. Survival is victory enough. No. Lelouch turned, eye gleaming with familiar calculating intensity. Survival isn't enough. Not when the cost is becoming indistinguishable from what we fight. The Imperium and Chaos are mirror images, both corrupt souls, both demand absolute loyalty, both justify any atrocity as necessary. The only difference is which flavor of damnation you prefer. Vladek's augmetic eyes narrowed. Careful. That borders on heresy. I want to. Crossamin Sir not River. I want River to that narrow scene sun did. I want River to that narrow. 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 Then call it heresy and execute me. Or listen. Lelouch pulled up data corruption statistics, rebellion rates, Chaos incursion frequency. Look at the pattern. The more brutal the Imperium becomes, the more rebels turn to chaos seeking escape. The more chaos corrupts, the more brutal the Imperium must be to contain it. It's a feedback loop accelerating toward galactic extinction. We need to break the cycle. How? By being nice to heretics? Vladic's voice dripped sarcasm. By showing mercy to daemon worshippers? The galaxy doesn't reward idealism, Lelouch. You taught me that with your own actions. I learned wrong. Lelouch's voice carried absolute conviction. Or rather, I learned half the lesson. Yes, this galaxy requires ruthlessness, but ruthlessness directed incorrectly just perpetuates the problem. We're fighting symptoms while the disease metastasizes. He highlighted specific sectors, worlds where he'd operated, populations he'd saved through manipulation rather than mass execution. These worlds have lower chaos corruption rates than Imperium average, not because we purged harder, but because we gave people reasons to resist corruption beyond fear. We created stability, not through oppression, but through calculated reform. Reform. Vladic spoke the word like a curse. The Imperium doesn't reform. It's been the same for 10,000 years, because any change risks total collapse. Then maybe it should collapse. Lelouch met Vladic's gaze unflinchingly. Maybe the Imperium in its current form is the problem. Maybe humanity needs something different to survive. The silence stretched dangerous and taut. Vladic's hand drifted toward his bolt pistol. You're proposing rebellion. Against the Emperor's will. That's not just heresy, it's treason, warranting immediate execution. I'm proposing evolution. The Emperor built the Imperium to save humanity. It's failing that purpose. Adapting to fulfill the original mission isn't betrayal, it's loyalty to the Emperor's true intent. Sophistry. Justification every heretic uses before they fall to chaos. Then test me. Lelouch extended his arms. No weapons, no defense. Use every method the Inquisition has. Psychic probes, torture, daemon interrogation. Determine if I'm corrupted or if I'm simply right and you're too indoctrinated to see it. Vladic stared at him for 10 eternal seconds. Then, surprisingly, he laughed bitter and exhausted. You magnificent fool. You've spent 2 years fighting chaos, becoming the Imperium's perfect weapon. And you still believe you can change the system from within. It's almost admirable in its naivety. It's worked before, in a different galaxy, different rules. Vladic sat heavily. But I'll admit I've had similar thoughts. Quieter, more cautiously, wondering if the Imperium's calculus has shifted from necessary evil to unnecessary cruelty. If 10,000 years of stagnation has made us less effective, not more. Then help me. Lelouch leaned forward. We have influence, resources, knowledge of how the Imperium actually functions versus how it pretends to function. We could create change slowly, carefully, turning individual systems toward reform while maintaining the appearance of orthodoxy. And when the Inquisition notices, when other ordos declare us radical heretics, we do what I've always done. Lelouch's smile was cold and calculating. We become the villain everyone can unite against. We orchestrate our own downfall in ways that create the changes we want. Zero Requiem galactic scale. Vladic processed this. You want to pull a Horus. Start a heresy. Vladic is not force. Unite the Imperium against you. Then fall in ways that reform the system. Not a chaos heresy, a human one. A rebellion that shows the Imperium's core principles protecting humanity, serving the Emperor's will, can exist without the brutality. We become the tyrants who prove reform is possible by forcing the Imperium to adopt our methods to defeat us. That's insane. It's necessary. Lelouch used Vladic's own word like a weapon. You taught me this galaxy demands impossible choices. This is mine. Become a martyr for change, or watch humanity slowly strangle itself on its own dogma. Vladic stood, pacing. His augmetic eye whirred, processing scenarios, calculating probabilities. Finally, how would you even begin? Tertium. We start here, in the sector we saved. We implement reforms, reduce oppression, address economic grievances, give people hope without giving them heresy. When the administratum objects, we use our authority to delay, misdirect, create bureaucratic tangles. Other sectors see Tertium prospering and demand similar reforms. The movement grows organically until the High Lords notice and send Astartes to put us down. Exactly. And when they do, we fight not to win, but to demonstrate that reformed worlds fight harder for the Imperium than oppressed ones. We prove through our rebellion that the Emperor's vision requires evolution, not stagnation. Then, when the time is right, we orchestrate our defeat in ways that force the Imperium to adopt our reforms to prevent future rebellions. Zero Requiem. You die a villain to birth a better world. The end. The end quote. The end quote. The end quote. We die villains. I'm not doing this alone. Lelouch extended his hand. The Imperium made me a monster. Help me be a useful monster. One last scheme. One final gambit. We lose everything, but save humanity from itself. Vladik stared at the offered hand. Everything he dedicated his life to, the Inquisition, the Emperor, the Imperium's survival warred with the growing certainty that Lelouch was right. The system was broken. Survival alone wasn't enough. Humanity deserved better than eternal grinding extinction. He clasped Lelouch's hand. This will probably damn us both. Probably. But we were damned anyway. Lelouch's smile was genuine for the first time in months. At least this way, our damnation matters. They began that night. Subtle reforms on Tertium, reducing Arbite's brutality, redistributing resources more equitably, creating channels for grievances that didn't require rebellion. The changes were minor, easily justified as improving operational efficiency. But they worked. Chaos corruption rates dropped, productivity increased. People had hope. Other governors noticed. Some requested similar reforms. Others reported the irregularities to higher authorities. The movement spread like fire through a promethium refinery, uncontrolled, dangerous, impossible to stop once started. 6 months later, the Inquisition officially declared Vladik and Lelouch radical heretics. Warrants were issued. Astartes were deployed. The rebellion had begun. Lelouch stood on Tertium's highest tower, watching Imperial Navy ships enter orbit for bombardment. Behind him, millions of citizens prepared to resist, not for chaos, not for personal gain, but for the idea that humanity deserved better than endless suffering justified by necessity. Any regrets? Vladik asked, checking his weapons one final time. Hundreds. But none about this. Lelouch's Geass gleamed. The Imperium taught me that sacrifice is necessary. Let's show them what we're willing to sacrifice. The first bombardment began. The revolution answered with defiance. And across the sector, watching from impossible angles, Tsiench laughed in colors that tasted like vindication and despair. The mortal had rejected chaos but embraced change itself, the architect's truest sacrament. Either the rebellion succeeded and reshaped the Imperium, or it failed and created martyrs for future reforms. Either way, the galaxy was changing. And change, always, belonged to Tsiench. The siege of Tertium lasted 63 days. Lelouch's tactical genius bought time orbital defenses, seized and repurposed defensive positions, maximizing the Imperial Navy's hesitation to commit full exterminatus. Propaganda broadcast across subsector channels, showing civilians fighting for hope rather than chaos. The Imperium couldn't simply annihilate Tertium without martyring the rebellion's ideals. But martyrdom was exactly what Lelouch intended. The Space Marines arrived on Day 40, Ultramarines, Codex adherent and utterly loyal. They made planetfall with perfect precision, their blue armor gleaming as they methodically dismantled Tertium's defenses. These weren't Chaos Marines drunk on demonic power. These were the Emperor's Angels of Death, genetically enhanced to be the finest warriors humanity could create. Lelouch watched them advance through hololith displays, calculating losses with cold precision. His force as PDF soldiers, reformed Arbites who joined the rebellion. Even former Lightbearers died by thousands, but they died well. Each death bought with extracted cost from the Astartes. Not victory, just cost. Proof that people fighting for genuine hope fought harder than those fighting from fear alone. We're down to final defensive positions, Vladek reported, his armor scorched from 3 days of continuous combat. The Ultramarines will breach the command center within hours. Time to execute the endgame. Almost. Lelouch pulled up communications arrays. I need to deliver one final message. Make sure every Imperial world in the subsector receives it. I need to deliver. I need to deliver. I need to deliver. I need to deliver. Receives it. He positioned himself before recording equipment, composing his expression carefully. Not defiance, not rage. Just exhausted conviction, a man who'd fought for something and lost, but left seeds for others to harvest. The broadcast began. Citizens of the Imperium. I am Lelouch v. Britannia, declared heretic and traitor by the Inquisition. In 63 days, this world has defied the Imperium, not through chaos worship, not through xenos collaboration, but through demanding that humanity's protectors remember what they're supposed to protect. We asked for justice without brutality, efficiency without cruelty, hope without heresy. The Imperium's answer was orbital bombardment and Astartes invasion. He paused, letting that sink in. I don't expect you to rebel. Rebellion is death, I'm living proof. But I ask you to remember that we existed, that for 63 days, 8 billion souls lived without the Imperium's constant crushing oppression and didn't turn to chaos. We proved it's possible. We demonstrated that humanity can be better than the nightmare the Imperium has become. Behind him, explosions rocked the command center. The Ultramarines were breaching. The Emperor built the Imperium to save humanity. Somewhere across 10,000 years, that purpose was lost. We became a machine that devours its own just to continue functioning. I don't know if the Emperor would approve of what we've done, but I believe I have to believe that he'd understand why we tried. The door exploded inward. Ultramarines entered in perfect formation, bolters raised. Their captain, a veteran marked by purity seals and honor badges, approached with measured steps. To those who survive me, Lelouch continued, ignoring the weapons. Remember this. The Imperium isn't the Emperor. Serving humanity isn't the same as serving the Administratum. And hope isn't heresy. It's humanity's last weapon against the darkness. Don't let them take it from you. Cease transmission, the Ultramarine captain ordered. By authority of the High Lords of Terra, you are sentenced to execution for heresy and rebellion against the Emperor's will. I know. Lelouch smiled sadly. I'm counting on it. I'm counting on it. He raised his hands in surrender. Vladek did likewise. The rebellion was over. The execution was public. Lelouch and Vladek were brought before Tertium's remaining population, 4 billion survivors, after the siege's carnage. The Ultramarine captain read formal charges while servo skulls broadcast across subsector channels. Heresy, rebellion, corruption, each word designed to delegitimize everything they'd fought for. But something unexpected happened. As Lelouch was brought to the execution platform, the citizens began singing. Not hymns to the Emperor, not prayers for salvation. The song Zero's rebels had sung in the Underhive 2 years ago, a melody about light reaching the forgotten, hope surviving in darkness. It spread through the crowd like wildfire. Millions of voices raised in defiant harmony. The Ultramarines hesitated. This wasn't chaos worship. This was something the Codex Astartes had no protocol for genuine human emotion. neither corrupt nor compliant. Lelouch met the captain's gaze. You can kill me. You can kill everyone here. But you can't kill what we've proven. That humanity is capable of more than suffering. That the Imperium's brutality isn't the only way to survive. Kill us, and you make martyrs. Let us live, and we spread. Either way, you've lost. The Imperium endures, the captain said. Your rebellion will be forgotten within generations. Perhaps. Lelouch knelt for execution. Or perhaps this is how change begins. One world at a time. One idea at a time. Until 10,000 years of stagnation finally breaks. The captain raised his bolt pistol. Before he could fire, an astropathic message screamed across all channels. Emergency priority. From Segmentum Command. Belay execution. By order of Lord Commander Guilliman. Lelouch's eyes widened. Rabute Guilliman, the returned Primarch, one of the Emperor's own sons. He'd heard rumors the Primarch was implementing reforms across the Imperium Sanctus, trying to modernize the Imperium's calcified bureaucracy. But this, the astropathic message continued. The heretic Lelouch v. Britannia is to be detained pending investigation. Tertium's rebellion demonstrated that reformed worlds show reduced chaos corruption while maintaining loyalty to the Emperor. His methods, while unorthodox, achieved outcomes worth study. Transport him to Macragge for personal interrogation. The Ultramarine captain's expression was unreadable behind his helmet, but he lowered his weapon. You heard the Primarch. Prepare the prisoner for transport. Lelouch was loaded onto a transport ship, Vladek beside him. As Tertium receded in the viewport, he saw the planet transforming, the siege's devastation being rebuilt. But differently. The Imperium's forces were implementing reforms, cautiously testing whether the rebellion's methods actually worked. Not because they believed in hope. Because Guilliman demanded evidence-based strategy. We lost, Vladek said quietly. But somehow, we won. Zero Requiem, Lelouch replied. Never goes according to plan, but it goes. Months later, Lelouch stood in the fortress of Hera on Macragge, facing Rabute Guilliman himself. The Primarch was immense. 3 meters of genetically perfected humanity, wearing armor that could crush tanks. His eyes held 10,000 years of exhausted duty. You started a rebellion, Guilliman said, voice like controlled thunder. Caused billions of casualties, nearly forced exterminatus on an entire sector, and somehow, you've reduced chaos corruption rates in every system your reforms touched by an average of 37%. I learned from the Imperium, Lelouch replied. Achieve objectives, regardless of cost. The cost was nearly your head. Guilliman studied him with disturbing intensity. But the results are undeniable. The Imperium has stagnated. My father built it to be flexible, adaptive. 10,000 years of dogma have made it brittle. Your rebellion demonstrated what I've been trying to prove, that reform doesn't equal heresy. So I'm not being executed? Oh, you're being punished. You'll serve the Inquisition under my direct oversight, implementing controlled reforms in target sectors. If you succeed, those methods spread. If you fail or show any chaos corruption, I'll kill you personally. Guilliman's expression softened microscopically. But the galaxy needs people willing to think beyond. This is how we've always done it. Even if they're arrogant, manipulative, and entirely too clever for their own good. Lelouch smiled despite himself. That's the nicest insult I've received in years. Lelouch smiled. I've received in years. Lelouch smiled. I've received in years. Lelouch smiled. I've received in years. Get used to disappointment. The Imperium changes glacially. You might die of old age before seeing real transformation. Then I'll die trying. It's more than most get. Guilliman nodded. Dismissed. Report to Inquisitor Valdek. Yes, I'm keeping you together. You're less dangerous as partners and begin operations in subsector Aurelia. Try not to start another civil war. No promises. As Lelouch left the Primarch's presence, his left eye throbbed one final time. In the warp, Tzientch watched with satisfaction. The mortal had rejected chaos, embraced change anyway, and somehow won permission to reshape the Imperium itself. Delicious. Unexpected. The game continued, but Lelouch barely noticed. He had work to do. A galaxy to save. One reform at a time. The Imperium would resist. Chaos would tempt. The odds were impossible. Perfect. In the grim darkness of the far future, legends are written in blood and forgotten in bureaucracy. The Administratum would eventually classify Lelouch v Britannia as a footnote, a minor heretic whose rebellion was suppressed, his reforms attributed to Primarch Guilliman's strategic genius, rather than the machinations of one impossibly clever mortal. But in the worlds he touched, the truth endured. Tertium became a model world, its citizens fiercely loyal, not from fear, but from genuine belief that the Imperium could be better. Other sectors watched and wondered. Governors who'd spent careers maintaining oppression through brute force saw Lelouch's methods producing superior results. Lower rebellion rates, higher productivity, reduced chaos corruption. Some dismissed it as temporary anomaly. Others quietly began implementing similar reforms, always carefully, always justified through Guilliman's authority rather than admitting they'd learned from a declared heretic. The Geass remained Lelouch's weapon and burden. Each use still tore reality, still attracted hungry attention from the warp. But now, he used it with surgical precision, understanding the galaxy's rules well enough to navigate their edges. The eye that had been his greatest asset became a reminder of limits that even genius had boundaries in a galaxy designed to devour hope. Vladek served beside him, the Inquisitor who'd captured a heretic and somehow become a revolutionary. Together they worked in shadows, implementing changes the Imperium couldn't officially acknowledge while maintaining the appearance of brutal orthodoxy. They executed heretics who genuinely worshipped chaos. They authorized exterminatus when no alternatives existed. The Great Rift still hemorrhaged horrors. Chaos still corrupted. The Tyranids still hungered. The galaxy remained a nightmare, where war was the only constant and survival measured in how slowly you died. But in the sectors Lelouch touched, humanity fought with something the Imperium had almost forgotten. Not just duty, not just fear, but genuine hope that their suffering might someday end. And perhaps that was victory enough. Not saving the galaxy too vast, too broken for one mortal's schemes, but proving that even in the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, there could also be progress, change, evolution. The possibility that humanity's long descent toward extinction might be arrested, reversed, transformed into something that honored what the Emperor had originally intended. Lelouch v Britannia had arrived in hell and refused to accept damnation. He'd fought the Imperium, served the Imperium, betrayed the Imperium, and ultimately became exactly what the Imperium needed. A brilliant monster willing to sacrifice everything, including his own salvation, for humanity's slim chance at something better than endless suffering. In the end, perhaps that was the truest form of loyalty to the Emperor's vision. Not blind obedience, but intelligent devotion to humanity's survival, whatever the cost. The Geass gleamed in Lelouch's eye as he planned his next operation, already calculating how to save the next world while damning himself just a little further. Guilliman watched and cautiously approved. The Imperium watched, and slowly, glacially, impossibly, began to change. And somewhere, entombed in gold for 10,000 years, perhaps the Emperor himself watched through dying psychic might and approved of the mortal who'd learned the galaxy's cruelest lesson, that in the grim darkness of the far future, hope wasn't heresy. It was humanity's last weapon. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. More stories await.